And good morning and welcome back to another live stream. Hope everyone had a really good Christmas um, and Happy New Year for 2025. Unfortunately, Jake, who we organised to do an interview with, had an emergency and couldn't make it this morning. So we're just going to look at a couple of news stories that I found watched over the Christmas break, Christmas and New Year break. But before we start that, um, I really need everyone's support. If everyone could subscribe to my YouTube channel, Blind Advocate. Once I get enough subscribers and enough watch hours, then I can get monetised and help with the ongoing cost of these live streams, because I'm paying for it out of pocket at the moment. So yeah, please hit the subscribe and share the video with anyone who you'd like. Before we start, I'd like to report that George Talopoulos is no longer on the IAC, the Independent Advisory Council. Thank God for small mercies. I don't think he did a very good job, in my opinion, in his role there. I'm really happy that he's gone. So hopefully that organisation may improve with the new members. As some of you may know, I did an interview early last year with the NDIA compensation team. So if anybody was suing for personal injury, the NDIA can take part of your settlement to help pay for your ongoing support costs, which is fair enough in my opinion. That's why you get compensation, is to help with those costs for the rest of your life. Now the NDIA is here, I think it's only fair and reasonable that people contribute part of their compensation to the NDIA, because you can't double dip, in my opinion. But that's leading me on to this story I seen a week or so ago, and I was shocked. I know what the compensation team said as far as what they can take and how they take it out of somebody's compensation. But you'll see in this incident, in this story, it's from a current affair. I'll just let the person who's being affected by this tell his own story. So if you just play that clip, please, Chris.
Carl spent most of his life trying to find a way to live with the harm that was done to him as a teenager in a state-run boys' home. He'd kept the abuse he suffered quiet until he bravely fought for justice 50 years later. But now, after a compensation payout, Carl's reliving that dark chapter all over again because someone wants his money.
So I used to train to fight. I used to fight because I liked hurting people. It's what it turned me into. Made me lash out. Made me feel less of a person. Made me hate people, especially men. I don't work with men, usually. That's one of my stipulations with the NDIS. But, yeah.
You okay?
Yeah.
Carl Young carried a horrific secret for 50 years.
were molested in the boy zones by the officers.
Labelled a troubled child, he'd been sent away. What happened seems almost incomprehensible by today's standards.
It was terrible. You feel the pneumonia. I was a very hyperactive child, and they didn't really have a diagnosis for me. They call it ADD now or ADHD now, but they didn't really have a diagnosis for me. They put me through exorcisms. They took me to see a psychiatrist when I was age of 6 years of age.
Carl says he turned to drugs and a punching bag for comfort. He long feared no one would believe him. Last year, it took all of his strength to speak out, and he received compensation from the state for the abuse he suffered.
Admitting that it happened. That was the first step. It was through the state, and state paid out.
But then a blow the 64-year-old says he didn't see coming.
When they said, we want some of that money,
Yeah.
could you believe that?
No, I couldn't. I was pretty shocked about it, actually. I couldn't imagine why, because I didn't think the NDIS was means tested. And I thought that because it was a criminal compensation payout that we got from people that had done criminal offences to us, that there wasn't really anything to do with them.
The NDIS took just over $20,000 of Carl's compensation, accusing him of double dipping. Carl started receiving funding after being diagnosed with schizophrenia, a condition possibly sparked by his childhood trauma. So, after receiving compensation for that abuse, the NDIS says Carl is being paid twice.
They didn't go through what I went through. They didn't go through what I went through. They've done nothing for me.
So you had no say in this. They've already taken the money.
They just took it. I had no say in it whatsoever. They took it when the claim was done and processed. They just took the money before the solicitors even seen it.
And now you're going to get it back?
Yeah, I know we've got to get it back. Yeah, it's like getting blood out of a rock.
The NDIS is trying to claw back spending in the $43 billion a year scheme, and it appears to be working. A recent report revealing the fund's financial position improved by more than $150 million in the last quarter.
Seems a bit unfair to me that they sort of like take from the little person when $20,000 in the big scheme of things in their budget is that's breakfast money. Oh, that.
Hey, Carl, how you going?
Yeah, good.
Solicitor Natalie Davis from Shine Lawyers stepped in to help Carl.
We preclude double compensation in the law because we don't like double dippers in Australia. But we say that the benefits that Carl's received are completely unrelated to the money.
And now, with talks breaking down, the NDIS is prepared to spend taxpayers' money to take Carl to court.
The NDIS is retaining barristers and people like that and paying more money for them than what they're probably going to get out of me anyway.
This survivor says after fighting so hard for so long, he won't be backing down.
No, I'm not going to let it go. I'm in there for the fight now.
What happened to Carl is heartbreaking.
Well, there you go. He's got to fight the government twice now. Like you said, this is not compensation for a personal injury. It's a criminal compensation from the state government because he was abused. Now, I believe in being fair. The people, participants of the NDIA and the NDIA itself, I think we need to be fair to each other. But I think in this case, it's gone too far. How can a criminal compensation be classed as personal injury? I don't know. I've had this discussion a few times over the last few months. People getting donations through different organisations. And I said, you need to be careful because that could be classed in the NDIA's eyes, could be classed as income, and they could take part of the value out of your funding. And one woman wanted to argue the point. And I said, well, go and watch my interview with the NDIA compensation team. But what Carl, he's had to fight the government for criminal abuse, for the compensation. Now he's got to fight the NDIA to retain that money. For a pensioner, $20,000 is a hell of a lot of money. When you have no money, $50 is a lot of money. I know, I've been there myself. But I think in this case, the NDIA is wrong. And I think the new minister, or whoever's taken over from Bill Shorten, needs to look into this particular case and reverse it, to be fair. I think I spoke last year about the NDIA cold calling participants of the NDIA and saying, oh, hi, how you going? We just want to ask you a few questions. And didn't they get a notice saying that was the few questions was actually a plan review, and their funding's been cut by 30, 40, 50, up to 80%. There was one person who answered the phone and they said, I work in the NDIA, we'd just like to clarify a few questions. And they said, is this a plan review? And then the person from the NDIA said, no, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. And again, he pressed back, is this a plan review? And once again, the NDIA said no. And they started asking questions. And the participant said, this really sounds like a plan review. Is it a plan review? And the person from the NDIA said, well, yeah, it is. So the NDIA are cold calling people, not letting them know it's a plan review, and then cut their funding. Because we're coming up to an election, and the government knows they're not going to win, so they're pulling stunts like this to prove a point that they're worthwhile managing the country. I mean, we have no recourse of stopping this sort of actions by the NDIA. Now I've written to Bill Shorten over half a dozen times in the last 2 years. And every time I wrote to him, he referred it off to the NDIA. Nothing's been done. So I went to my local federal member, Barnaby Joyce, and he's making investigations on this issue, these cold calls on plan reviews. I mean, what happens if a person who has a cognitive impairment answers the phone and answers the questions and they don't know it's a plan review? Then they get their funding cut. Is that fair to the person with a cognitive impairment? No. It's, highly immoral and unethical. bordering on being discriminatory. And the government's been pulling this with the changes. They don't release the changes until a day before they're implemented. So if the changes are being implemented on a Wednesday, then the government will drop the papers on a Tuesday, not giving people enough time to review the changes. Now, I'll give you a personal situation that I'm going through at the moment. Every year since I've been on the NDIS, and when I was getting, before the NDIS, I was getting ad hoc grants, sort of like fundings for things that I needed. And I was buying things that I needed through that. Now that's gone out through ADAC's gone. So the NDIA, we're paying for my windows to be cleaned once a year, inside and out. I can't do it. And my wife can't do it. She's got her own health issues. And we get the carpets cleaned once a year. I rang up August, September last year, spoke to my support coordinator, asked if we can get the windows and the carpets cleaned. They said yes. So we went ahead and booked it. Then in October, when the changes came in, we paid for the windows and the carpet cleaning out of pocket, waiting to get reimbursed. And after the changes come in October, our fund manager is refusing to reimburse us, even though I got permission prior to October. Now I'm out $1,000 plus interest because it's on credit card, because I was expecting to get paid back. Now, what options do I have? I could argue with the NDIA, but that's not going to work. So I'm going to have to pay it off bit by bit, including the interest. Now, that's a cost I have to wear. I have a friend who's going through the same thing. I won't go into these details because I was talking to him yesterday. Same things happened to him. The bloody government bring these changes in, don't drop the papers that contain the changes until a day before the changes are implemented. Again, immoral, unethical, in my opinion, and discriminatory. I think the last one was like 93 pages. We had to go through and read and try and make sense of what the government was saying. And you only had 20, they dropped it the day before the implementation of the changes. It's not right. And the bloody useless IAC and the useless NDIA board, what were they doing to fight this, to stop this from happening? Now, I've asked for copies of the minutes and the agendas of the IAC and the NDIA board, which are public documents. I should have free access to them. They will not provide them. So I've lodged a complaint with the Privacy Commissioner, and I will take legal action because I want to know what our so-called representatives on the IAC and the NDIA board were doing to stop all these changes from happening. Now, let's not forget that all the IAC members and the NDIA board are handpicked by the current government. Now, when we have our next federal election and Albanese loses, because the Labor Party will lose, the Liberal government come in and handpick their own IAC members and the NDIA board. How can they be our representatives when they're handpicked? You try to contact them, they never respond. Never. I've contacted 4 or 5 members of the IAC repeatedly for the last 18 months to ask questions. Not one response. Not one. The only response I've ever gotten from the IAC is when I lodged a complaint against George Talapouros for that cartoon he put up. Humiliating people with disabilities and degrading support workers. And I've got a letter from the chairperson of the IAC saying he's entitled to his own opinion. Yes, he's entitled to his own opinion, but not when he's making public statements saying that he's a member of the IAC. And the chairperson of the EAC, the Every Australian Counts. I wrote a letter of complaint to them. I've rang 2 or 3 times in the last week to speak to one of the board members of the EAC. Again, won't return my calls. Useless, self-interested, self-promoting bastards, in my opinion. We've got to stop all these things from happening. We've got to change things. And the only way we can do that is we all get together and pressure the government. We should be electing our own representatives to the IAC and to the NDIA board. Because when they're handpicked and appointed by the current government, or whoever, or whichever government's in charge at the time, when they're handpicked, they're going to do what they're told to do. They're not going to be our representatives. And this has got to stop. But getting back to this last video clip, it is so wrong. Giving back his $20,000. He's 64 years old. He's been through enough. You know, having to publicly discuss what's happened to him with the abuse, it takes a brave person. So he was kicked in the guts when he was abused. He was kicked in the guts when he sued. And now he's being kicked in the guts again from the NDIA. No. Anyway, we'll move on to the next clip if you just play and this is from a current affair as well. So.
When the National Disability Insurance Scheme was established, it was supposed to make life better for our most vulnerable, and there's no doubt it has helped. But the system is also badly flawed. In a bid to rein in spending, the federal government recently changed the parameters around how and what people can claim, which has suddenly left families, many with severely disabled children, without basic needs.
They use terminology such as no value for money, which is just so degrading, that there is no value to provide a wheelchair for my disabled child who can't walk. I mean, how do you stomach that as any parent, but especially one whose child is disabled? It's discrimination and it's bordering on human rights issues.
At just 8 weeks old, Erin's daughter, Luella, was diagnosed with a rare form of epilepsy. Later, it developed into Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which is much more severe. At her worst, she was suffering 100 seizures a day.
These seizures affect the brain dramatically and cause irreparable damage and a lot of disabilities.
Now she has around 10, but there's no telling when they'll occur or how dangerous they will be.
She cannot walk, she cannot talk, she cannot self-feed, and she remains incontinent.
For someone at home that wouldn't understand Luella's condition, what does it take to look after her every day?
Her current developmental capacity is really that of, say, a 6 to 12-month-old, but in a 5-year-old body. So you can imagine how challenging that would be, manoeuvring her around, managing seizures, changing nappies, bathing, feeding.
It's little wonder Luella needs to be watched round the clock.
All day, every day, 4 to 6 hours a night, we are up with Luella because she is seizing and needs to be medicated and needs constant supervision in case she has lack of breathing or an ambulance needs to be called.
Erin says the NDIS recently cut Luella's funding, putting an end to her at-home care, heaping more pressure on Erin and her husband as they also raise their 2-year-old son. But it's not just the at-home care that's been denied.
They have outright refused funding for a wheelchair. She can't walk and she weighs 15 kilos. I can't carry her everywhere. And she's 5 years of age. She's outgrown prams and they're not suitable for her. She needs a wheelchair.
Erin is one of many victims of major cost-cutting changes to the National Disability Insurance Scheme, including alterations to what's considered NDIS support.
They're just taking funding away and essential services and needs and technologies and equipment from children like Lulu without understanding how detrimental and how dangerous it is really to be doing this. So we do a fair bit of screen time, unfortunately. I love my daughter. I love her more than life itself. But epilepsy is just barbaric. It just steals so much on so many levels. Disrupt her.
Erin's furious the NDIS assesses the child's needs without ever meeting them in person. She claims her reports weren't properly looked at. Here, a letter from the scheme calls Luella by the wrong name.
This is kind of the prognosis for the rest of her life. She probably won't ever live independently. We'll be her full-time carers. And it's really scary to think about that. What happens when we're at an age where we can't look after her? What happens when we die? What your titty?
They make assessments about people or participants in the NDIS scheme through paperwork, through a computer screen.
Alicia's daughter, Koa, lives with a rare and incurable neurological condition. The 3-year-old also suffers from advanced cerebral palsy and chronic lung disease.
Koa lives her life on oxygen. She is on life support. She has constant suctioning, nebulizers.
Bubble pop, I see your wrist moving.
Music therapy was a simple activity that helped Koa deal with her pain. She loved it, but it's now been axed from her plan. Alicia says it was proven to the NDIS the therapy was beneficial to Koa's quality of life.
So when it decided to remove music and art therapy from its scheme, that deeply saddened and affected Koa and our family. Sit over here and read a book with Ava.
Funding for Koa's in-home care has also been slashed. Alicia fears if it's cut any further, her daughter will need to live at hospital.
Every child deserves to be at home with their family. Every child deserves to be sleeping under the same roof as their mum and dad.
After the federal government changed its funding guidelines, it announced it would inject $1 billion into the scheme to hire 1,000 more staff and to crack down on fraud. Families, though, don't trust the process and fear funding isn't going where it should. These are just some of the many emails we've received. Our inbox here at A Current Affair is flooded every day with people desperate to share their stories, desperate for help.
It's really frustrating feeling not heard and feeling like we constantly have to justify ourselves and feeling invalidated and not believed.
Renee is a mother of 5. 4 of her children live with disabilities.
2 months ago, my son got everything approved that the therapist had asked for. However, 2 months later, after the NDIS changes, NDIS didn't approve anything.
Parents across the country, tired and desperate for help.
We're very, very exhausted and very burnt out trying to do the best we can as parents.
Those with a disability especially, they deserve the chance to be able to have somewhat of a normal life because they've already faced with so much adversity from the start.
All of our lives are isolated now. It's definitely nothing like what we thought parenting would be.
Well, there you go. That's just confirming what I said a few minutes ago. So they're going to spend $1 billion to employ 1,000 more people so they can cut the funding from the NDIS participants for the clients. Does that make sense to anyone? Truly, does it make sense? $1 billion to employ another 1,000 people. Now, what goes into training these 1,000 people? Now, I've been told if they're going to be working for the NDIA and operate the phone system, then they do a 3-day course. But if they're going to become a plan manager, it's a week. Just to make sure that all the right boxes are ticked. And it's all done over the phone, not face-to-face like it was when it first was implemented. They're ringing up, not telling people it's a plan review, tricking people by doing that. To cut funding. That's all they're doing is cutting funding to save money so they get re-elected. People with disabilities, especially those poor bloody kids. Political footballs. I was in my early 30s when I got my first disability. And still running? Oh, my apologies. My Wi-Fi cut out, and we've had to hotspot through my phone. Maybe the government's listening. Maybe they're trying to shut me up. I don't know, but yeah, it's absolutely outrageous the way the NDIA is operating. $1 billion to employ 1,000 people, to cut funding for the participants to save money. Sounds like a Bernie Madoff scheme to me. Really does. You know, I've got absolutely no respect for Bill Shorten, for the Australian Labor Party, the NDIA board and the IAC. No respect whatsoever. In actual fact, I detest the lot of you. I truly do. And I thank God I have a great service provider and great support staff. Now, my plan ends on the 29th of January, and I've been told if I need to keep my domestics and yard work, then it has to be written into my plan. I mean, what do these wankers think they're doing? Yeah, I'm blind. I have multiple disabilities, complex needs. My wife works. She has her own health issues. And apart from my wife, I don't have informal supports. My kids are out on their own, with their own life, working and studying. But am I expected to get my family to stop working and help me when I need it? Idiots. The governments are just idiots. I hope the Labor Party don't get back in. I truly don't. I'm not a fan of Peter Dutton, but I think the Liberal Party do a far better job than the Labor Party. I mean, how much money they wasted on the Voice referendum, the promised cuts to the electricity. It's like $300, it's like $1 a day. They didn't keep that promise. And then everyone held them accountable. Then we got it back again. I mean, what are people supposed to do? We need to have face-to-face plan reviews. We need to be able to talk to the NDIA staff and express the needs that we have, to express our concerns face-to-face in our own homes, not over the phone. Because if it's done over the phone, the NDIA just have the upper hand. They have all the power, and they can just hang up. Not saying they would, but because they want to cut more funding. Maybe we should change the name of the NDIA to the Bernie Madoff scheme. $1 billion for 1,000 more staff. Ridiculous. And you get members of the IAC, like George Teleporis, making public statements that support workers are just bum wipers and all they're there to do is wipe bums and cut up carrots. Outrageous. Handpicked by his old mate, Billy Shorten. Because don't forget George is part of the AICD organisation. I think a third prior to the new people coming in to the IAC. Nearly a third of the IAC and the NDIA board members were members of the AICD. So, Bill Shorten, I thought you was a reasonable person after these cuts. You're just a prick. I don't like you. In my opinion, you're a complete arsehole. And they did announce the person taking over from Bill Shorten. I don't know what she'll be like, but I hope she does a better job. I hope she listens. I'm going to find out what training the NDIA staff do to do plan reviews. Because when I went on the NDIA, the very first time I had a plan review meeting, the young girl that was with the NDIA, shared all my personal, private, really personal information. And I wasn't happy giving it because it was it was embarrassing, humiliating. And I said to her, "What qualifications do you have to do this job?" "Oh, that's a personal question. I'm not going to answer that." And I said, "You've got to be kidding. Look what you got in front of you. You've got my life story or my personal private information. You know it." No, I don't have to answer those questions. And once she said that, I knew what the NDA was going to turn into. You know, the government stuffs up, but the participants of the NDIA got to pay for it. Outrageous, completely outrageous. You know, I've listened to so many carers, family members, talking about having their funding cut, which Bill Shorten promised would not happen. Now, wouldn't that be like classed as a verbal contract? Promising someone that something wouldn't happen? He promised these things would not happen. He promised. And it turned out to be, yet again, untrue. Is there anybody in the comment section or? Okay. Yeah, what I said in the last half hour, they're my views and opinions. And some of those are based on facts that I've been told from other participants, carers, family members, support workers. Yeah, support workers that they go into a person's life and they see the impact firsthand. And they're distraught into what's happening. That'll be my first rant for the year. We might end it there, but if anyone has a story or has a topic they'd like to discuss or me to raise, you can email me at blindadvocate007@gmail.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Jeff Parker. Or if you want to come up and tell your story, you want to come up and discuss something that's important or relevant to you, please feel free to email. I'll respond to you as soon as I can. All right, we might end that there. I'm going to contact Jake and try and organise an interview for a fortnight's time. I've had a few health issues with my heart over the last few months, and I've got to go to Newcastle at the drop of a hat for treatments and tests. So sometimes I may not be able to make a usual live stream, but we'll keep up the fight. We'll keep the pressure on. All right. Okay. Thanks everyone for listening, and please feel free to contact me. Thanks, Chris.